Hey guys, Pooji here, and in this video we're going to translate these white UI designs into dark UI designs. And I'm also going to discuss the process, things to consider, and also what you should tell your clients, and why is dark UI a good solution or a bad solution depending on the project. So let's jump right into Figma and let's create these dark UIs. All right, so we're back in Figma, and by the way, these UIs were created in 3 different tutorials which we tackled in the previous YouTube videos. So feel free to check them out if you want to recreate these screens from scratch. But now what we're gonna do is we're essentially going to select all of them, bring them down, or actually duplicate them using Shift plus the Option Alt key. And basically we have a duplicate of these screens right here. So I'm going to rename them. So we're going to have one, then -dark. We're going to do the same for these other ones. Always want to basically see which frames have a dark UI and which ones are white. So you can use any naming convention that you prefer, but essentially it's important to keep that distinction clear, especially if you have a project with a lot of different screens. So the very first thing that we're going to select for and change for the dark UI is the background color. So, and also, by the way, what is important, why it's important to keep the UI, the light UIs above is because the moment that you're going to change elements such as the background color, you're going to start missing some elements. So it's always good to have the original at the very top. So let's go under fill, and what I like to do is to opt for a dark which has some sort of a hue, and most case scenarios it's going to be a blue hue. So here we go, we're basically changing this to a dark with a little bit of a blue hue, simply because it's working in this specific instance. And usually for the background I'm going to go with the darker hue, while for the elements above I'm going to go with a lighter hue. So at this point what we're gonna do is we're simply going to select individually these elements and start changing them to a white UI, so that we can actually see what's going on. So for example, for these guys, I'm going to change them to white, and then I'm going to go in the individual frames. And we're going to change these to dark. So one thing that I like to do is to sample the background color and then just make it a little bit lighter. And this really helps in creating that division. And usually this color, like these 2 colors, I will sync them up in design system. It's a small project, so we can basically avoid doing that. But if you're working on a client's project, that would definitely be the good way to go. So at this point, I'm going to select these text, because I don't want to change the background color to a dark and then not seeing all of these. It will be tedious to basically select them. And by the way, as I was mentioning in the intro, dark UIs can be really useful and really good in some instances. However, one thing that you have to take in consideration is that you're going to need to do the entire project twice, meaning that you need to create all of these screens in a darker UI. Now granted, it's a faster process than creating the first version, of course. And also one thing to consider is that it's mainly an aesthetic change. However, say that you're changing some elements in the original screen. Well, you're always going to have to keep in mind that you're going to have to change the dark UI as well. So unless you use components and symbols for pretty much everything, you're going to need some manual adjustments, and things can get tricky, especially if you have responsive versions as well. So just something to keep in mind overall. Now at this point, I'm going to change this one. Oops. Going to change this one right here. So let's see what was going on when it comes to this element. So I have this unsplash. Why is that an unsplash photo? Anyways, let's just change it up. We're going to make this white. All right. So maybe one thing we could consider is to change this bottom menu to a blue. It's just this one. Maybe we can consider changing this on the left. Like this, or just whiter. Yeah, we'll go with this option. All right, I think this one is looking pretty interesting. However, I don't really want the emphasis to be too much on the button. So we're going to basically bring it down a bit. I'm going to make these be like with a little bit of an opacity. Change this, and we are good to go. All right, so as you can see, most of the elements are taken care of almost automatically. Now we're going to essentially change these last ones. And I think this is looking pretty good. All right, now at this point, we can see that we need to tackle this second one, and this image on the top is blending with the background on the bottom. And we can see over here that we need to adjust the linear gradient so that it matches with the bottom section. And over here we have also some text which we need to make white, and just like that. And now at this point, let's bring also these to be white. Let's change the color of these guys as well. And of course, we're going to modify these other elements. So let's select both of them. Let's make like this. Let's select all of these text. Let's make it white, including this view option. All right, now at this point, I'm going to select this element right here, change the color. I'm going to do the same for this one here directly, so we don't have to think about it anymore. These are at 50% opacity, so I'm just going to select them, bring them at 50%, or actually I think we changed the color, so let's just sample the color and we're going to be good to go. So again guys, why should you use a dark UI? In my opinion, if it makes sense for this specific project. So for example, crypto space, a lot of users of a crypto app might be into dark UIs. Just I know this because of the space, and you can do some market research and basically figure that out. So this might be something that some users might prefer having instead of the light UI. They might prefer working with the dark UI. So this, although it's just an aesthetic decision, so it doesn't really have any functionality feature in most scenarios, at least. It can help make the user experience just more enjoyable for that particular user. So it's something that you could consider doing in order to improve their user experience. But again, it really depends on the market, their preferences, and things like that, really. So, all right. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're working on a dark UIs is to make elements clear, and you have to test this absolutely in your mobile device in order to be sure that things like menu items and things like that are clearly visible. Especially you don't want to use the dark backgrounds to be very similar to the lighter dark elements. You don't want them to blend in too much. So these are all things to consider whenever you're working with dark UIs. So definitely keep accessibility in mind, and the best way to check this, in my personal opinion, is just to test it live on a mobile device. Really isn't too many ways around this, in my opinion, but again, really depends on how you approach the project and all that. So all right, I think something like that could work well. Probably going to change this color as well with these elements, simply because I think this blue background makes it easier to read, and I want emphasis on call to actions instead of these elements. So what I'm gonna do is I'm simply going to change the colors of all these elements here, make them white, and have this blue for the background. All right, and also quick thing, if you want to present these elements, you can consider having different backgrounds. It's just this one right here. So yeah, pretty much that's it. Hope this video was useful, and I'll see you in the very next one.